everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Alpha Omega. This series goes over a brief history of the past and present locomotive with the lowest number, and then those with the highest number. Today I'll be focusing on our second Canadian railroad in the series, and fierce rival of the previous episode's railroad, Canadian Pacific. This will be a shorter episode when compared to the last three, and production for this episode has been delayed for the official release of the present-day Alpha, so without further ado, let's begin. Since there technically isn't a CP Rail number 1, the ultimate alpha of Canadian Pacific's 141-year history goes to an unlikely candidate, shop switcher number SL2, since number 2 is included in its official number and therefore qualifies it as an ultimate alpha. Like many shop switchers, SL2 initially started its life as a standard steam engine with various purposes, specifically as D3B class number 608. The engine was built at CP's New Street shops in Montreal in November of 1892, and it ran in mixed goods service along with a wide variety of 10-wheelers on various branch lines across the expansive Canadian Pacific system. The engine was later renumbered to 432 and then 332 as it was superheated in 1913, and was also reclassified to another D class of 10-wheelers, although the exact class is unknown. Eventually, the almost 40-year-old engine would be converted into a shop tool tank engine as its tender was replaced with a small bunker as it was renumbered to L1500, as it served West and back shops in Winnipeg. Sometime later, and rather unusually, the shop engine was given streamlining along with official CP lettering and a logo on its cab as it was renumbered to SL2, or shop locomotive number 2, thus being one of a handful of streamlined shop switchers in the world, and likely the smoothest riding with its 460 wheel arrangement. SL2 was then assigned to switching services in its hometown of Montreal at the railroad's Angus shops, as it also worked with shop locomotives SL3 and SL4, with no recorded instance of a SL1, hence why SL2 is the ultimate alpha. However, the unique shop switcher was retired sometime in the 1950s as it was moved to a storage yard in Toronto as it was finally scrapped in 1958. Despite most of its history being covered in mystery, with supposedly 3 photos in existence for this engine, it certainly had one of the most interesting operational careers, going from an average branch line 10-wheeler to a streamlined shop switcher, quite possibly the only one of its kind in all of Canada. Now, had this video been made a year ago, the present-day alpha for CP Rail would have gone to OCS Unit FP9 number 1400, but CP Rail recently announced the production of their first hydrogen-powered locomotive, in which one of their older engines was converted to run on hydrogen, and was initially going to be numbered 101, but later renumbered to 1001. Since both numbers are ultimate alphas, I decided to hold out on making this episode until the newly renumbered engine entered revenue service, to which it finally did in October of 2022. So now that this engine is finally in service, I can now officially cover it as the present-day alpha for CP Rail. This engine initially started service for CP Rail as SD40-2F number 9024, the last of 25 wide cab variants of the successful SD40-2. Built in December 1988 as the railroad's DRF-30Y class, 9024 along with the other Red Barns served a variety of mainline and branch line freights throughout the CP system, most notably on the railroad's American lines on former Soon Line trackage. However, these engines had a relatively short service life on the railroad for EMD engines, as 9024 along with about half of the class was retired in 2012 since CP CEO, Hunter Harrison, deemed them as surplus at the time. But thankfully all of these engines would be acquired 3 years later by a newly formed regional railroad that ran along former CP rail trackage in Maine, the Central Maine and Quebec, which was also funded by the same investment group that funds Brightline, so they get a few pensy points by being related to a topic that I mention on the channel frequently. Once on CMQ property, 9024 was repainted into the railroad's blue and silver livery about a year later, as it led various road freights for the Class 2, along with its sister wide cabs from Montreal to Bangor. Although, the engine's service life on CMQ would be even shorter, as CP Rail eventually acquired the CMQ in June of 2020, thus not only buying back some of their original trackage, but also their original engines. Faced with yet another surplus of SD40s, many of these Red Barns were quickly reassigned to maintenance trains across the CP Rail system, but the railroad was now facing another, much greater challenge, reducing carbon emissions. 9024 was selected as part of a special program to convert a diesel engine with a brand new hydrogen-powered prime mover, in which solar-powered hydrogen fuel would only result in water vapor instead of CO2 emissions. Thanks to a provincial grant, this conversion project was announced in October 2021 with a striking new blue, green, and silver paint scheme, as the engine was to be designated as a Class H2OEL for Hydrogen Zero Emissions locomotive. The final engine was released to the public just a few months later, in January 2022, with the engine finally entering service on October 28th of the same year, where it switched a few lumber cars with heritage unit number 7010 near Calgary. The engine made the news again when it was seen switching steam engine number 2816 at the Calgary shops just a few weeks later, thus showing how much the railroad wants to show off its latest innovation in railroading. 1001 is the first of 3 engines to be converted for hydrogen power to test the viability of the emerging technology along with a switcher and another road locomotive, as the future is looking bright for this engine along with the rest of CP Rail, as this rare type of engine has been given a new life with a larger role in railroading history. After a bit of research, the ultimate Omega in the railroad's 181-year history is also the present-day Omega, in which it's part of the few classes of engines that's in the 9000 series. Now, the Ultimate Omega is a bit of a paradox in which it's unique for having the highest number on the all-time roster, but is also one of the most common locomotive classes with arguably one of the least interesting histories. This engine is AC 4400CW number 9840. Built in June of 2004, 9840 was the last member of the railroad's CRF-44 class, which is CP Rail's designation of the GE AC 4400CW, since the DRF stands for diesel road freight and 44 stands for 4400 horsepower. Since the AC-44 was introduced back in 1993, and with the model being replaced in GE's catalog by the ES-44AC in 2005, this also makes 9840 one of the last of almost 3,000 AC-4400CWs ever built. Despite being built at the end of the last of 6 batches, 9840 was still built with the same purpose, to offer the benefits of AC traction power with the same features of the DC-powered C44-9W, all while rivaling EMD's AC-powered SC70 Mac. In the case of CP Rail, they also wanted to replace their aging Alco Sentry engines on slow-moving manifest trains across the country, as they were also one of the few railroads that utilized the new steerable trucks that primarily provided distributed power for DPU service. Although, once it was built, there really isn't anything too notable about 9840's career on CP Rail, as it mostly did what it was built to do, by hauling various manifest trains across the CP system, notably along former Delaware and Hudson trackage and Soon Line trackage, along with the occasional foreign power on Eastern Class 1s. In regards to the rest of the AC-44CW class on the railroad, many of the members of the class were rebuilt starting in 2017, with a variety of upgrades including high adhesion trucks, new generators, overhauled prime movers, and updated cab electronics, as they were renumbered and designated the AC-4400CWM for modernized. Since the rebuild program is still in progress at the time this video was made, a good portion of CP's AC-44s have been rebuilt, and although there currently aren't any plans to rebuild 9840's batch, it's highly speculated that 9840 and other late AC-44s will be rebuilt sometime in the next few years, and likely given lower numbers. Whatever the future may have in store for this Ultimate Omega, one thing's for certain is that this engine will continue to serve a wide variety of mixed goods trains through the various regions of Canadian Pacific. Thank you all for watching this episode of Alpha Omega. Again, I'm glad that the wait to make this episode is finally over, since the previous episode of this series was released all the way back in February, and there was no telling when the H2OEL would enter service. In the end, I'm glad I made this decision, as it allowed me to focus on other series on the channel, especially fixing your branch line. But besides that, I've been particularly interested in the selections for this episode, as despite being the shortest in the series with only 3 engines, the 3 entries couldn't be any more different. A little known streamlined shop switcher, a hydrogen powered white cab SD40-2, and the last of a common engine type for CP Rail. What a great way to showcase the diverse roster of this centuries-old railroad. Thank you again for watching. Credit for all the photos used go to their respective photographers, and stay tuned next time for the next Class 1 down the line, CSX. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Have a good day.